If you need an easy-to-use data protection for XCP-ng environments, then Storware Backup and Recovery is one of the solutions that you may want to try. In this video, I'm going to give you a short overview what is possible with this solution. Let's start by logging into the console. The dashboard actually shows you different indicators. What's the success rate? What's your current protection rate? Activity that has been in the platform for past 14 days, backup destinations, storage occupation, and many more. In order to start working with XCP-ng, the very first step is actually to go to the virtual environment, and in the infrastructure hypervisors, you are able to add standalone hypervisors for the XCP servers. So if you have a pool of XCP servers, you need to add all of them, so that that includes also the master host. And using the create button, you have to choose the type, like XCP-ng should be here on the list. Then you need to provide the IP address, username, and password. For the XCP-ng environment, we support two strategies. One, VM image file plus separate disk means that this is going to be an export for full backup using the XVA file format, and the separate disks means that the deltas are going to be exported during the consecutive incremental backups. Those are cumulative backups in this case, so starting from the last full. The second strategy is separate disks plus change block tracking, so that obviously requires newer versions of the XCP-ng, starting from version 7, and that also allows you to not leave any specific data on the hypervisors for the future incrementals in this case. Using this method, we will export raw disks for the full backups, but separate, and increments are going to be deltas since last backup, regardless of the type. Now, once you have added that, I have already one XCP hypervisors already in my environment. You can invoke inventory synchronization. So this executes, this enqueues a new task in the task console, and the aim of this task is to collect the information from your hypervisor. That includes the instances, the well, technically you can have a pool of hypervisors, but also networks, available storage repositories, and so on. The result is that you should be able to see in the other tabs, like the storage or networks, the available artifacts, but in the instances tab you will see also the virtual machines. The same could also be achieved using the dashboard and the configuration wizard, here button on the top right, so you can actually add sources using this third step. So you don't have to use it just during the initial configuration, you can also use this wizard later. Once you have virtual machines, the very next step is to create a backup SLA. So backup SLA here allows you to specify which virtual environments will be backed up according to these rules, and rules describe basically the backup destination and when the backup occurs. So in my case, I have 4 schedules already in place. Well, actually relevant are 2 of them for the XCP here, and we will have file system as the backup destination. So you can have multiple backup destinations configured in your system. We may store backups into 1 or 2 of them if you enable secondary backup destination. But you need always to have at least some backup SLA in order to specify the retention for your backups. So notice also that auto-assignment feature can be optionally enabled, so based on the tags that you assign to your virtual machines or naming convention, you are able to invoke backups in your environment, and automatically this policy is being assigned to the newly detected virtual machines. VMs can also be optionally automatically removed if they no longer match the criteria, so that depends on the mode that you set. So let's invoke a backup process. So on the list I have one XCP-ng already in place, so I will invoke backup, let it be incremental. In order to incremental to work, we need to have some point in time obviously recorded on the hypervisor. So you always need to have at least one incremental schedule in your policy. Otherwise, we will not leave the snapshot for the next iteration, and we will have to fall back to the full. And depending on the strategy, you may need to have the support for the CBT if you wish to use this one. Now, backup process in general doesn't require any installation on top of your inside your Citrix environment. We may be installed outside because we are going to use just the APIs that are exposed by your hypervisors. So in this case, this export actually takes place from the remote host, and the very first step is to export data to the staging space, and later store phase is going to move data to the specified backup destination. Now, the backup destinations I have mentioned here are of different types. So we support file system, object storage, and enterprise grade backup destinations. So for file system, this may include synthetic backup destinations. That is that in this case it is going to work specifically for the CBT strategy. But you may also use other options like isolayer if you would like to define remote network file system which is dynamically attached and detached for security purposes, so that your data is not going to be overwritten by any kind of ransomware. From the object storage, we support obviously S3 or S3 compatible, Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft Azure, and OpenStack Swift. Many of our customers also use some legacy enterprise grade backup providers. That includes the Dell, EMC, IBM, Veritas or Micro Focus solutions. So these can also be supported. These can also be added here directly from our menu as one of the backup destinations. Notice that our backup is already being completed, so we have export. Store has already stored data. One very important aspect, if you would like to have this store task basically prevent store tasks from any additional double writes, you actually can configure staging space of the place where we temporarily store data together with your backup destination targets. So that includes even remote NFS, for instance, so that we can move data instead of copying them again over the wire. Notice that in my case, this is shared because it took only 3 seconds, and then once the other stage is complete, we have a complete workflow already finished. It means that I should now have my backup already in the history here. So in the details of such virtual environment, notice that I have several, well, obviously key information at the top, but if you scroll a bit down, you'll have charts describing backup restore statistics, especially backup size. Maybe it's important for your backup time, which give you the overview which phase takes most of the time for your backups. The same applies to the restore, and complete restore history is at the bottom. This can also be filtered either from here or using the calendar that we have on the right, so that it is more narrowed down to the backups that you would like to verify. My backups are stored in one location, but remember that you can have them stored in 2, and snapshots tab will report you current incremental backup, current snapshot that is used for the incremental backups on your hypervisor. So this is required only for incremental backups. That also includes the CBT strategy. because snapshot is actually the point in time information for us, which data needs to be exported. But if you leave the schedules without any incremental schedules, so leave the policies without any incremental schedules, so the full backup only approach, that would just remove automatically the snapshot just after the backup is complete. Another tab allows you to exclude some disks from your virtual machine from backup to be done. And notice that you may also sometimes want to override the strategy that I have mentioned on the VM level basis. So if you wish some VM maybe to export using different strategy, then this is the place to go. For the XCP-ng, we also support snapshot management, so we are able to periodically create snapshots on the hypervisor and remove them according to your policy. We recommend to keep this number of snapshots low, so that you don't have too many snapshots on the individual drives of your VM, because it otherwise may affect your performance. From the backup consistency perspective, remember that we support either quiet snapshots, which are supported by the XCP-ng, but also we can enable pre-post snapshot command execution over SSH in this case, or if it's a Windows, we may also invoke the WinRM if necessary. So for Windows guest, it may be important to execute some QuiesDB command just before snapshot takes place and release this quies, so tow the file systems maybe just after the snapshot is done. Now let's invoke maybe the restore. So the restore is going to be to the hypervisor, and we have a small wizard in here, so I'm going to have restore2, let's say, as the name, to the original hypervisor. And in the storage tab, I may optionally even exclude some drives, maybe give them different name, import to the different storage repository. Specify networks for different network adapters, and optionally I can power on VM, for instance, if I would like to have it immediately available. By default, these are powered down. Remember that it may be necessary for you to adjust networking of such virtual machine, so that it's not going to be duplicated with your production. Restore process again is two-step process, so we have the restore that gets the data, fetches data from, let's say, S3 or other storage, and then we have an import phase where the data, once it is merged, is going to be pushed back to the hypervisor. I said once it is merged because for non-synthetic backup providers this step is required, so the delta chunks needs to be merged into the base image and later pushed back to the hypervisor. But for synthetic backup providers and CBT strategy, this step actually wouldn't be needed, so the restore would be instant, and with the data would be just imported back to the hypervisor without additional intermediary step. So this one took 1 second because we see that it is synthetic, so it's going to be fast, and now the import takes place. This should be actually visible already in my restore history. For all of the jobs like backups and restores, you may optionally download the log files or view the details in here, so that's the main list to check. And in the meantime, we can actually check other tabs. So snapshot SLA, this is the place where you define the snapshot management policy. Rule is simpler because it actually just specifies the number of versions and number of days, how long your backups should be kept. And for Citrix, for the XCP-ng virtual machines, actually you just need to specify these parameters, and the oldest snapshots are going to be removed. Another is recovery plans. So recovery plans allows you to have batch restore. So unlike I did right now, so I had to restore individual VM, you can actually create a plan how to restore batches of the VMs. So if it's going to be XCP-ng RP1, let's say, recovery plan 1, and I click save, it means that I have now section that goes with the rules. Rule 1, and I can specify, let's say, my my VM. Optionally, it can be periodic, okay? So you can invoke such recovery plan on demand, but you may also assign schedules. And restore parameters. So you can either invoke it with last successful backup for each virtual machine, which is the usual case, but you may also want sometimes to invoke on purpose regardless of status. So it means that if the backup was failed, restore is going also to fail in such scenario, and this is going to be just for reporting purposes. But more important parameters are there at the bottom, because notice that you, apart from regular restore parameters, you may want to have some naming convention for your restored VMs, like periodically RP1 as the prefix or suffix of your VM, and you may wish also to overwrite VM, so delete if it already exists, with the name, original name, maybe original name with snapshot, or auto-generated in other way. Notice that my restore has already succeeded, so I have restored to VM already in my XCP-ng. From the restore perspective, there is also one additional option. It's called mount. So for file level restore, we have to mount backup, and you have 3 modes. You can mount file systems automatically, so we can actually invoke this one already, and we can also specify file systems to be mounted. That's especially important if you have a small partition that you just want to browse and you don't need to restore everything. If it's not LVM, it's going to just restore a drive that hosts this specific partition. And you may want also to expose whole drive over iSCSI. That's very nice feature for Windows guests. So if you have other Windows guests, you may want to preserve Windows permissions. So this could be lost if you use regular automatic mount, but using the iSCSI share, you could directly expose whole drive to the external system and mount it there. In my case, I have one drive, and I could here specify the iSCSI initiator IQNs. Mount also requires restore plus mount, so the restore has already been successful. And in the mounted backup tab, I see that I have already running mounted backup, so it is going to take a moment. But I also have previous version of the backup, so I can already browse the previous one. So I see that it was mounted in the auto mode, and I can browse and have the same feeling using single, let's say, having single root file system available directly from the web interface. Optionally, I can also grab these files directly from the node if I need to. So I can either restore from here, let's say, like the boot directory, and I would like to grab this file. That's the one way to do it. And in this archive, it's going to be all of the files that I selected, but I can also initiate remote upload to some host over SSH or WinRM. So I don't have to download the files here. I will just push data directly to some remote host from here. From the scalability perspective, it's worth to mention that I have also the multiple node support. So for the bigger environments, I can have more data movers, not only cover all of your hypervisors with one data mover. So that basically concludes our demo. I really encourage you to download and try it by yourself. So we have also a free version available for a limited number of virtual machines to be protected, and give it a shot with your XCP-ng environment. Thank you for watching.